Thank you. So welcome panelists and guests. So this is the third event in the series that we're running to celebrate 25 years of the doctoral program in educational research, otherwise known as DPER. Thanks for coming, and apologies for the alternative format. We'd usually be doing this in person, but of course things being what they are, it's a bit tricky, and these are obviously difficult times. So 25 years of any course is quite an achievement, and for distance / online doctorates, this is obviously a major thing, given that there hasn't been necessarily that much online or distance doctoral provision up until more recently, I suppose. So for those people who don't know, DPER is a professional doctorate taken over 4 years, with 2 years of structured assignments and teaching, delivered mostly at a distance, but through residentials and week-long residentials. And although the next year, so the cohort starting in January next year will be entirely online before we hopefully revert to the normal run of things. So the first 2 years are taught and assessed, and the second 2 years of the program are an individual research project, supervised doctoral research project. What's also unusual about DPER is that the assignments usually take the form of 7,000 word pieces, so essentially journal articles which are submitted as preliminary pieces in the same way that you would a journal article, and then based on feedback they're resubmitted, hopefully for publication in a sense. And actually a lot of our students go on and publish their pieces, and this is entirely encouraged. It'll be interesting to hear if any of our panelists today have published their work from DPER, either during the course or from their research projects. And if you want to know more about the course, please look at our web pages, which will hopefully be posted up later. Before we get going, a few pointers about how this will work. So if you want to ask questions, please post them in the chat function. And because there aren't hundreds of us, when the space for asking questions comes in, you'll be able to ask your question yourself rather than have me reading them out, unless you'd like me to read them out. I'm quite happy to do that. So I'll follow the chat and then bring in the questions, and if you want to ask your questions, that's great. So also remember, this is being recorded and will be on our YouTube channel, and also sections will be in our podcast as well. So thanks to our 4 speakers today. So the point of the panel today is for 4 graduates from different points in the program, relatively recent to not so recent, to reflect on their experiences of DPER, how they came to it, who they were before they started, and who they are since DPER. So all of our speakers today are active in academia. We have Professor Veronica Bamba, Ronnie Bamba, if you hold your hand up so we know who you are. Thanks, Ronnie. Catherine O'Connell, Dr. Catherine O'Connell, Dr. Simon Snowden, and Dr. Catherine Hasted. So I'm not going to introduce them because it makes a little bit more sense for them to introduce themselves. It gets the thing going. So my name is Richard Budd, and I'm a lecturer in higher education in the Department of Educational Research. And at the moment, I actually teach on one of the modules on DPER, which is Researching, Learning, Teaching and Assessment. So I'm chairing the session, but hopefully I'm going to be mostly in the background, kind of playing host in a way. So if we can start off with you, just give a brief introduction as to who you are and what you do. And I'll just go kind of clockwise as I see it, starting with Catherine OC. What's
Hi.
Your name and where do you come from?
Catherine O'Connell, and I work at Liverpool Hope University, where I'm a senior lecturer in education studies, and I also have a role of being director of a research centre in the School of Education, which is called the Centre for Education and Policy Analysis. That's me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Simon.
Hi. So I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Liverpool. I'm the outgoing director of studies for one of the biggest programs in the university, business management. with about 1,000 students, so very much a student-facing role. And I'm also Director of Education within the management school, which is more of a staff-facing role, concerned with helping planning around teaching, but also developmental work around teaching.
Right, okay, thank you. Catherine H.
Yeah, I'm Catherine Hasted. I'm the Head of Strategic Business Partnerships at the University of Cambridge, but I'm also a Director of a programme called the University of Cambridge Think Lab, which is designed for doctoral students from across the university. Okay,
great. And Ronnie?
Hi everyone, I'm Ronnie Bamber. I'm Professor Emerita, which means basically semi-retired, or nobody pays me, of higher education at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh. I was on cohort 6 of the programme, so I started it 20 years ago, which is quite a long time, but I still recognise a lot of what I hear colleagues saying about the programme.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. So, the next question is essentially, what if you could give a potted history of your life up to DPER and why you then came to DPER? You know, people come to DPER usually having had a professional career at some point, and then DPER fits in terms of your forward progression. So, Catherine H.
Yeah, I'll try and be potted. So basically, the sort of story really starts 6 years ago. So before that, I was a professional in commercial organisations and also not-for-profit organisations, but always with a strand running through of working on training. And then basically my husband got a job opportunity, which meant we had to move to Cambridge. And I moved from being a chief operating officer for a national organisation to thinking, right, what do I do now? It's a great opportunity to maybe sort of pivot my career. And because it was Cambridge, I was really interested in the university, and I managed to get a foot in the door and ended up working with doctoral students, which is something that I did for the sort of first 3 years of the programme. And absolutely loved it, but I just thought, credibility wise, how can I work with doctoral students if I haven't got a doctorate, which is a bit so really that's why I looked for programmes across the UK. And because of the work I was doing, I knew that the solitary route of some PhD programmes can be really difficult, and I really like working with other people. I bounce off other people, so I was looking for a cohort programme. And that's what took me to the doctorate that I took, and I'm very glad that I did.
Okay, great, thanks. Simon?
20 years ago, I was in the commercial sector, running a developmental and research department and doing medical imaging kit for hospitals. And I was headhunted into the university to run a research centre. Within months, I joined as part of the lecturing team. A couple of years after joining, there was a management school formed, and our whole team, our whole group, essentially joined the management school. So for many years, I happily plugged along as somebody from the commercial sector teaching within a management school. But then we began to get increasing accreditations in the management school, and more those without a doctorate were frowned on, is probably the strongest term you could kind of say, as accreditation bodies more and more kind of dictate the balance of who works in academic positions in management schools. So partly is similar to Catherine, that notion of getting some kind of credibility through getting a PhD, but also I did a teaching qualification in my own institution, and that really kind of sparked a huge interest in understanding the way in which we as a species learn, and how that learning kind of takes place and impacts on the society, the organisations, the institution in which we work. So in discussing with another alumni from DPER, I decided to kind of go to Lancaster. And one other final motivation is I come from very much a quants background, so numbers I never found any real difficulty with, but I was quite fascinated, increasingly fascinated by more qualitative approaches to research, and so felt this would be a good opportunity to explore and that side of the research process.
Okay, Ronnie.
I came to the programme having been a Spanish lecturer for 20 years, and I had got increasingly interested in learning and teaching rather than the subject itself, or as well as the subject itself. So I made the jump from teaching Spanish to educational development. And I soon realised that, again, the word credibility keeps coming up, that to have any kind of credibility with the academics in my research intensive institution, I really wanted to have a doctorate. I also felt I needed the confidence that being familiar with the research in learning and teaching would bring me, because I hadn't come to that. I was so amazed when I went to conferences and people knew about that research, and I really didn't. I'd got the job based on other things, being a practitioner rather than a researcher. So I wanted credibility, I wanted to build my confidence, and it certainly did that for me.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. Catherine O.C.
I've been in a variety of, you might say, academic related roles for about 20 years of my career. I was at Manchester University for nearly 10 years as an academic developer there, towards the end of which I was thinking a PhD would be a good move professionally. But then I moved to the British Council, where I worked in the higher education team, sort of fostering international partnerships. And it was towards the end of my time there was a very large scale voluntary redundancy scheme in operation. So something in that just prompted me to revisit the idea. The attraction of doing a PhD, and a former colleague at Manchester had done the Lancaster programme, so I had that one quite forefront in my mind, and it proved to be a very good way of going through a transition in a very productive way, and helped me find my way into an academic role and into a teaching position, which actually I love, and I think I'd always run away from because my mother's a teacher and I didn't want to be copying her too much. But anyway, the timing seemed right on this for me.
Could you say a little bit more about how you came to DPER? I mean, of all of the options out there, why was DPER the one that you chose? Catherine O.C., sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
I think there was a recommendation aspect. That's absolutely the case, and I liked the dimensions of the cohort aspect to it, and then I suppose as I was getting to familiarize myself with the program, I liked the way there seemed to be a sort of an intellectual coherence to it. I recall reading on the website sort of theoretical commitments. There was this sort of social practice set of theoretical resources that seemed to span across the different elements of the program. And I was very clear in myself that I wanted a structure provided by a professional doctorate rather than a lone scholar model, and that was absolutely, for me, the right choice.
Yeah, Ronnie, how about you? How did you come to DPER?
Again, recommendation, and knowing other people who had done their PhDs in a very solitary fashion. And in fact, my husband did one round about the same time as me in another university, and I watched him on his own struggling along without the cohort support. And I was so glad that I was part of a community, because I felt right from the start of the programme that I was part of that community, and still feel that I'm part of that community, because even now I go to conferences, and from the sort of research that people are doing and the things that they say, I'll think, oh, you're a Lancaster graduate, so I recognise you're part of my group of people. So yeah, the cohortness was a really important factor for me.
Yeah, that's something that's come up a few times. Catherine H., is there anything you'd like to add on in terms of how you came to DPER?
Yeah, no more than what others have said. So again, for me, as well as the cohort, which I knew from sort of practical experience, it was a recommendation. So quite a few people had actually done the part-time course. And that was another thing, because it was part-time. You have to, you know, if you're investing that much time into doing something as difficult as a doctorate, you know, you do need to sort of get that personal recommendation. So that definitely really helped me.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Simon, anything to add? Mike, on please.
It's a classic Zoom. You'd think we'd all got it sorted by now. Same as everyone else's recommendation, but it was the nature of the recommendation in some way. So cohort was a part of it, although people who know me know I'm not always the best mixer. But I still found getting great connections with people was really useful, and it provided a nice focus. But in terms of the recommendation, when we talked about the structure of the degree, of the PhD, that was something that really spoke to me. So that 2 halves, and the fact you were writing from more or less day one, and you were practicing that core skill of getting a doctorate straight away, not just the writing of it, but, you know, more or less the minute we walked into a classroom, we were already beginning to think about our first research project. And it was that kind of approach that really drew me in, because it wasn't the notion that this was 4 years before you'd see your dissertation coming out. It was practically within a couple of months you'd see some of your writing work coming out and beginning to get constructive comments around how you were developing from the earliest days as a researcher. That really grabbed me.
Yeah, Simon, if you will continue with you a little bit and then sort of go around the room again, as it were, the Zoom. But if you could say, so we're at the point now where you arrive, so you've chosen DPER, certain things attracted you to the program. And what surprised you when you started? You've already mentioned the kind of from the get-go, you're writing and doing research. But what surprised you when you started the course?
It was surprises. God, you're making me think back. I've not got the greatest of memories around that. For me, it was the staff and how there wasn't a distance. There was a real sense of them being in the trenches with you. And that's not what you always get from courses. You can have, the lecturing staff can very often be at a bit of a distance from you, but you didn't get a sense of that. You had a sense that they were a part of the cohort community as well. And it surprised me how quickly I came to identify with members of the staff. And that drew me in even more. But also how well the cohort seemed to coalesce together. A couple of rocky moments at times. I think I was necessarily at the center of some of those, but actually it worked quite well. And the thing that I think was really useful, and I hadn't expected at all, was the way in which different cohorts were mixed. So all, you know, through your first part, when you first start, you've got a cohort that's a year ahead of you. And they all sound very, very intellectual and well-groomed and know what they're talking about and everything like that, whereas you felt quite out of your depth and wondering what was going on and trying to adjust to this new style of learning that was coming your way. And then, you know, in a year's time, you were those people as another new cohort came in. So again, the way in which the structure was produced was actually very helpful in allowing cohorts to coalesce their own identities, get their own identities, but also in helping inductors without formal induction, if you like.
Okay, thanks. Catherine H., what surprised you when you started DPER?
Yeah, well, I was chuckling then because I was one of the cohorts below Simon, thinking, blimey, he knows everything. So thank you, Simon. Yeah, following really what Simon said, it was the fact that you started writing very, very quickly, but not only that, it's the speed at which you climb that hill of academic writing. So I think part of that is because the course is really good at socialising you academically. So the scariest thing is when you start sharing your writing first, I think. And it breaks you into that really early, really quickly, really safely, because you're in a safe space with other people going through the same thing. And I think really quickly that helps you understand, you know, other people's approaches. You learn from that. You learn from reading journal articles together, critiquing them. So it's just a very well designed program. And I think, and that was a pleasant surprise, was the fact that there's a lot of energy, despite the fact that it's been running for 25 years. It's, you know, you have all of that security that it's been done before and people have refined and finessed it. But every year there's this huge energy from the academics who are, I think, quite interested to see who's going to bring what for this next round of learning. So I think the level of energy also surprised me.
Yeah, great, thank you. Ronnie?
Surprises. I think 3 things probably surprised me. All of them quite pleasant. The first thing was that I was really anxious. As a typical sufferer from impostership syndrome, I thought immediately they're going to spot me as being the thicko on the course, the one who shouldn't be here. And I soon realised that actually we were all in the same boat. So that was really comforting, and there was a lot of humility amongst my cohort and amongst the cohort above, although like you, Simon, I was impressed by how much more they seemed to know than I did. So the second thing was that the programme staff seemed to treat me as a peer, as if I was a fellow researcher, which I thought was hilarious at that point. But before I knew it, I was writing with some of the staff, co-writing and publishing with them, which I was really shocked by. The third thing I think was that I had expected to do a programme in educational research, and I got that. What was a surprise was the extent to which I could focus in on my day job. So that initial motivation that I had of gaining confidence and credibility, that would have happened if I had become an educational researcher. But the fact that I was able to specialise fairly quickly and focus in on what I needed to know to help me do my day job better as well, that was really a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's interesting teaching on the course, is that you see some people arrive and they very much move from the beginning what it is that they want to be looking at, whereas other people take time to come to that. And both of them are okay. Catherine, OC, surprises.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned energy, and I very much felt there was an energy from the Lancaster team, and there was certainly a very high nervous energy in the cohorts. You know, when we got there on the first week that we spent together, I seem to remember the first couple of days, I'm sure I had a rash on my neck the whole time, just from just being out of the comfort zone. But you quickly, I could see very much it wasn't only me, and many of my colleagues on the course, you know, hold quite senior management responsibilities, but it's just that sense of being in a different mode. But I think that practice of the early writing was so useful in just breaking that down. And as someone said, you know, reading journal articles together and sharing your different perspectives and reactions on them. And I did also really like the way that the academic team took a very, you know, genuine interest in the context that we worked in, and on a couple of, you know, occasions came to sort of visit different members of our cohort to find out, you know, with genuine research interest behind it. So yeah, I think I'm really echoing what a lot of people have already said.
Yeah, okay, Catherine OC, we'll stay with you. What was the impact that the course has had on you professionally and personally?
Well, it helped me to make a change in my career and you know, move into an academic role, which I think is something that perhaps I always wanted, you know, to have the mix of research and teaching and some of the academic sort of management sides as well. And being on the program itself and the structure of it helped me to pursue, you know, a few avenues of interest. I didn't arrive with a sort of clear-cut, burning research topic, so it gave me the space to try a few different angles and levels of analysis. And then just the insight into other organizational contexts, you know, people talking about their own professional environments, and indirectly it led to me getting my first, you know, visiting lecturing job through a colleague on the course. And I also think very much that the structure of this program and encouraging you to write and to publish from the early stages was absolutely key in getting my you know, lectureship at Liverpool Hope, because I had 2 publications from early, you know, the phase 1, which I think were very, very useful in getting the interview.
Yeah. Okay, Catherine H, on to you. So what impact has DPER had on you?
Yeah, so personally, having a cohort of people where you're so bonded to them, and I see faces of people I know today, so hello, that's really important. You know, you can't put a price on that, and hopefully we'll have that forever, so that's been really powerful. Career-wise, I've now got a permanent role. I'm still on the path of, you know, reaching the point of being a full-time academic, so that's the ambition, but it's helping me get there. And with my supervisor, so Dr. Brett Bly, who is fantastic, I've now published a book chapter. So thank you very much for that, Brett. And we'll carry on writing. And also, a couple of months ago, I had a professor at Cambridge who I hadn't ever met, had read my thesis online, and he's actually now asked me to co-edit a book with him next year. So it just, that would never ever have happened, and that's never happened to me before, where someone's reached out like that because they've read something that I've written. So it's phenomenal, the impact it's had.
Lovely. Simon, how about you?
Quite a profound impact, I think, in many ways. Coming into this, very much the empiricist, you know, concrete world is all that matters kind of thing, but I've come to much more appreciate more conceptual understandings that can arise and be useful in helping to explore the empirical world. So that has been quite a personal thing in a sense, even though it's professional the same way. Professionally, it's led to me getting SL, it's led to me leading that big program that I'm just going out of now, to being director of education. It's had all those kind of progression kind of components occurring in there, along with beginning to sort of go into all that writing. I'm also a fanboy of Brett Bly, sitting there in the middle of my Zoom, sort of working on a book chapter with him at the moment, plus also 2 other papers. And then that damn disease called COVID arrived and has really put the cat among the pigeons in a lot of the writing. But hopefully I'll be returning to that again in the coming months. Promise, Brett, it'll come, it'll be there, not far off. So it's had quite a profound effect on my life and the direction that I've been going in, I must admit.
How about you, Ronnie? So you come from the humanities onto the course. You know, that's a different starting point to Simon, for example.
Yeah, very different, but conceptually I also learned a great deal that's been of very practical use to me throughout my later career. I'd say that the programme gave me a platform on which to base the rest of my career. So I could never have imagined applying for a professorship. It was actually a member of a cohort who was 1 or 2 above me, who happened to mention to me one day, why aren't you applying for a professorship, which I thought was a ludicrous suggestion. But she encouraged me to go for that, and staff on the programme also did. So that led me to research more, and the more you do the research and you get out there and you present at conferences, you're invited to go to other places, it's certainly cumulative. So one opportunity leads to another. And once you're on that platform, it's much easier to make the most of those opportunities. So yeah, and that then led to other things happening, like being offered leadership of national learning and teaching projects, for example. So I think all of those were a direct result of me having done the programme.
So, yeah, from everyone, I think the word that stands out is the impact has been profound. What's your favourite memory of the course? If you could pick out one thing, Ronnie, how about you?
Oh gosh, so many. Very many of them are social. Some of them I will not mention. They revolve around things like hangovers and late nights in kitchens where we really got to know each other, and which really consolidated the support that we gave each other all the way through. I suppose one memory is sitting as a cohort, having a picnic under a great big tree on campus on a lovely summer's evening, and just enjoying being there together. Really warm memories.
Okay, Catherine H., how about you? Best memory?
I think my best memory, actually Ronnie mentioned something made me think about it, is I think it was the first time we'd had a residential. We had a lecture with Professor Malcolm Tite, who we shouldn't have favourites, but I have to say is one of our favourites as a cohort, because he really made us think for ourselves and not lean on other people sort of for the answers. And we were all experiencing imposter syndrome, so we were sort of pretending to be academic but didn't quite understand what was going on. And we were talking about epistemology, so the nature of knowledge, and there were sort of rumblings in the audience about how do you spell that, and then somebody shouted out, "Epista what now?" And we just all sort of, you know, it just broke the ice, and we all realised that we were learning. It was terminology we'd never come across before, some of us, and that really sort of brought us together as a cohort. And what was even funnier was, if anyone's ever watched Educating Rita, the play by Willie Russell, by the end of the week it was like epistemology bingo. So we were just mentioning it in conversations and being very academic, and, you know, glasses and tweed jacket and everything. So it was just really good fun, and that's you know, that to me sums up Lancaster, learning together and growing together.
Yeah, Catherine O.C., how about you?
I think similar, you know, social, just those informal discussions that carry on over lunch and in the evening. Remember going out on a day to Arnside, lovely sort of by the sea, with sort of one that keep you pretty busy on those residentials, but there was one part usually in each one where there'd be a free afternoon, so just going out perhaps 2 years in and just feeling like you'd really earned a sort of chance to enjoy the day and just socialize. You know, I think we did bond very well as a group.
Yeah, Simon, how about you?
Memories. One of the big memories that sticks out in my head is the Viva, but I'm not going to say too much about that, with Brent especially in the room, considering he was putting me through it. I'll tell you now, they do not give a PhD away, and it is in a Viva where you realise you've got to win it. But what sticks in my mind is always enjoying coming up to the residential. And looking forward to seeing people again, getting involved in the discussion, getting some focus back if it might have drifted a bit since the last residential. That was sort of, that just is a flavour, notion of however you want to describe it, just sticks in my head about the whole of doing the PhD. But, you know, other specific memories is two of our cohort became quite close friends, and then spending a week here at my house, international colleagues, both from Singapore, and showing them Liverpool, taking them around Liverpool. They were Liverpool fans, taking them down to Anfield and things like that. That social thing again is a big part of doing this particular program.
Yeah, and that's very different from doing it online. And of course, it's a few people have spoken about the difference between doing a structured course and doing the kind of the sole researcher PhD, which is the one I did. It's a little bit different to that, or very different to that. If you were going to make a recommendation to people who are thinking about doing the course, or people who are on the course already, what would that be? Ronnie, how about you?
I think two things. One is, if you look at research on postgraduate students and study, what tends to get in the way is life happening. And it is absolutely clear that we are all mature people with multiple responsibilities. You know, we're there with a couple of kids, a job, family getting ill, etc. Life is going to happen during the program. And I saw it happen time and time again in my cohort. And I remember thinking, please don't let my mum get ill while I'm doing this course. Please don't let my mum get ill. That would be it. That would be so hard. It did happen to a number of people. So just to be aware that life happens, the support structures are there to help you when that does happen, and try not to fall behind and lose your cohort. So the cohort thing, again, is part of your support structure. So for me, it was really important to stay with them and so that when things did go belly up, then I would have that support. The other thing I think is the importance of discipline. So like I said, I did the program with a job that was more than full-time, a couple of kids, other things going on. I didn't get a PhD because I was academically brilliant. I got a PhD because before the kids got up at the weekend, I would be up in the study reading papers and writing from 6 o'clock onwards during the whole of the program. It was pure discipline, and you could think of that as slog. I did not go on a holiday without my laptop. I didn't take a car trip without sitting with a journal paper in my lap. So keeping up the discipline for me was really important. And that is tough, but it was also a great joy. I got a lot of pleasure out of those early mornings, sitting reading papers when everybody else was still asleep. So that's my two things.
Okay, Catherine O.C.
Yeah, I think one thing I remember working through myself and with alongside other colleagues on the course was that because you were doing the PhD alongside the day job and trying to relate it in some way so that it could be of use professionally, it was often quite natural to try and or be tempted to look at something particular that was happening at the time, whether it was a policy or some sort of new way of, something of the now, if you like. But as people on the course, remember Malcolm particularly emphasizing this, don't be too centered or directly centered on the policy or the initiative, because that may come and go. If there's a change of tack at government level, or the funding gets pulled, and that of course can happen whilst you're doing a 4-year PhD. So it took each of us a bit of time just to sort of find a way of drilling in and finding the actual issue we wanted to research, which was perhaps manifest in that policy, but could be looked at in other ways. And in all of our cases it was possible to find that angle, but it just took some of us, and myself included, a bit of time just to sort of broaden the gaze a little bit. But there was great support in doing that.
Yeah, that's interesting. That speaks a lot to the notion of making a contribution to knowledge. It's not just about what you learn about a policy, it's actually what you learn that is transferable beyond that, or kind of, as you said, it's kind of the issue that's underpinning that. Simon, how about you? What would your recommendations be to potentials or actuals?
There's a couple of things. There's what helped me enormously was that I personally had quite a good idea of what I wanted to do, more or less from the get-go. And I don't think that's always the case for people, but it did help me, because it allowed me to structure, especially that first half of the PhD, allowed me to structure the kinds of things I did for the writing that allowed me then to begin to hone in on exactly how I was going to be tackling it. So I found that was extremely of extreme help for myself. I also found it useful to begin to bring that, the kind of things I was learning and I was reading, back into my actual practice as soon as possible. That was really important for me because it helped maintain focus. Because again, most of us doing this have full-time jobs, and you're not doing the PhD that far out of what a PhD would student who was doing it full-time. So I think I was about 4.5 years when I finished, which is not much more than a full-time student. So if you've got good focus on what you want to, the area you want to research in, and then can use, especially that first year, to explore various aspects of it. And if you can bring it back into your practice concurrently, so that you're making use of it, can help focus. But the key part, I think, mentioned by Ronnie, is support. Support is really, really important. And I was very, very lucky in terms of the support that from the cohort itself, the kind of chats and discussions and the kind of keeping each other going, but also at home, it was really important. I'd like to do a shout out to my wife, Anne, whose phrase was bearing the burden and lightening the load. And my, am I having to pay back now for that bearing of the burden and lightening the load that she was doing throughout my PhD, and gave me the room to do the reading, to do the writing, to have space when you're on holiday and everybody else is trying to do holiday things, and what you're doing is slyly sort of slinking off into a room with a laptop. Having that space and support from your family is absolutely critical in my mind.
Lots of nods around, around the group there. Catherine H, over to you.
Yeah, no, big shout out from my family too, and the cohort. Yeah, it's just reinforcing what other people have said, I think. Two things from me are just, go for it. There's never a right time for anything in this life. It's never going to be a perfect time to start, and all of us had all sorts of responsibilities and challenges, and in that long period of time, that's inevitable in a way. So yeah, start now. And just as Simon was saying, I think invest as much time as you can before you start, and in the really early days, to really zone in on what matters to you. So I think we all observe things in our lives and our work practices where things work really well and we want to reinforce that, or things that irritate us and keep us awake at night and we think, if only we could change it. And I think the PhD really does give you power to build up an evidence base and change things. So, and you have to live with whatever you choose for the next 4 years. So really zone in on what matters to you. And as Simon said, how can you link that to work? Because it being smart and trying to link the two does really, really help you. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Okay, that's great. Do any of you have anything that you'd like to ask each other or add to the discussions that we've had so far?
I've got a question.
Go on, Catherine.
So yeah, just I suppose I'm really interested in how you took that step into full-time academia, and tips that you can share with those who are interested in that. Okay.
I'm guessing you could all respond to that in some ways. Ronnie, you've got a longer track record in that sense. How did it work for you?
Research, research, research. That's where you get the credibility, and the proof of the pudding is in the list of publications and the conferences and the seminars that you've spoken at. And that speaks volumes when you are going for interviews. I think you mentioned that as well, Catherine, being able to demonstrate the outputs that you've got. So yeah, research outputs.
Yeah, Catherine, I see you mentioned a similar thing. Is there anything else that you'd add?
Yeah, I think the format of this program means that there's potential to get quite a few publications from the PhD, which is obviously really valuable. But I also think that the cohort experience does give you a really good sense of the research culture that you want to try and continue, and then the collaborations and over the 4 years, I think most people are and have built up research collaborations through other program colleagues and other academics. So those are something that you can take beyond and into, you know, an academic career. Yeah, those would be two things.
Yeah. Simon, anything else?
You have to think strategically. Every time something comes your way, you have to think a bit about, you have to have a selfish side, and you kind of have to think, what does this do for me? Where does it take me? It's like when you're thinking about the theoretical lens to explore a particular issue, it's got to do work for you. And so nearly everything that comes your way, you've got to think about what kind of work it will do for you. Collaboration. Collaborate with anybody and everybody you can, which is, it took me ages to realize that conferences weren't just something to go for a meal and a bit of a jolly. They're actually places to go and find somebody to work with and to collaborate with on various projects. And so and I find it really hard doing the networking. My wife's brilliant at networking. I wish I could take her to conferences. It would make my life so much easier. So I think that is quite critical, because once you get collaborators, you start doing that work, you're sharing a lot of the load, and it takes you much more rapidly towards those outputs, which are absolutely critical, the papers and everything like that. So for me, collaboration, and think carefully about everything you do. Will it provide me with those outputs? Will it provide me with the space to get information and get data to develop those outputs from? Will it give me more connections and collaborations through which I can develop those outputs?
Yeah, yeah, that really sort of a range of things. Of course, one of the difficulties at the moment is that the academic job market is looking potentially a little bit tricky. But yeah, publications certainly help. Do any of you have any questions for anyone else, or should we open up to the floor? We don't have any questions in the chat. Does anyone else have a question? If not, I have one on backup. But Brett, please.
Yeah, actually, the question I had in mind to ask has just been kind of just answered. So it was about what you were all seeking credibility in the beginning, and did you achieve it, and what does that look like, and where does it come from? But since that's kind of been commented on, I'm kind of also interested in the ongoing connections with members of the cohort that you maintain after you've kind of finished. I mean, we could think this kind of, you know, you graduate and it finishes, but it's clear from your account that that's not the case. So could you say a little bit about how those are maintained?
Let's go Simon first, and then.
On the whole, I think our cohort splintered off in different directions, but there are two who I keep in contact with, but it's friends rather than specifically in an academic sense.
Yeah. Catherine H.
Yes, so but it felt to me like the start of sort of a publication journey. So like I've mentioned, Brett Bly very kindly agreed to work with me on a book chapter. I'm working on another one, which I know Simon's going to be involved in the book. And we're talking now about doing some work on arts and humanities. So it was a real starting point and the baseline for future publications. And I am in contact with everyone from our cohort. So it's a really good point. I think it's a really good thing as well to look at, you know, how we can carry on working together. We did do conferences together, which were phenomenal. So yeah, to me, it's the start of the journey, and we're definitely carrying on, which is great.
Yeah, Catherine, how about your cohort?
Yeah, it was more, I think, more socially with you know, the contact is on that basis. But I do try and contribute to the biannual conference at Lancaster, you know, your higher education close up. And that seems to bring together quite a community of alumni, and, you know, a good place to link back.
Ronnie, cohort 6.
It was a tiny cohort. I think there were only 6 of us. I'm still in touch with one of them. I'm still very much in touch with staff on the programme, with whom I share both academic and friendship relationships. So that my basis has been more with the staff than the very small number that were in my cohort.
Yeah, Brett, you stole my question, but but I'll let you have it. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I would just make a comment.
Of course, please.
It's probably the most helpful and positive thing that I have ever done in my life. I should say, apart from getting married and having 2 kids, of course. But it was just such a joy to do the programme. And now when I meet people and they say they're thinking about doing a PhD, and I say, go to Lancaster, and I just wish I could go with them and start it all over again.
I would love to echo what Ron is saying. I miss doing it, I must admit. And I would love to carry on doing it, as it were. And I mean, I wouldn't put family and kids aside. I actually think this is the best thing. At least it's stopped taking money out of my bank account.
Yeah. Okay, Renee, you had a question?
I'm very much the outsider here, but it's so lovely to see, what you have been doing there. The reason why I sort of wanted to attend is a kind of twofold. First, it's nice to hear about Heku. I don't know if any of you came to our Cape Town Heku in 2018, but we always have a fairly large group of South Africans who love to participate in Heku. But the reason why I was very interested in this, my field of research is higher education, but more particularly engineering education. And we have now for 2 years, we've been running a PhD program similar to this. It's not a professional PhD, so it's a research PhD. But our cohort of students come from the engineering education group of people who do not have PhDs. So they are people who typically would have a technical master's in engineering, but then wanting to now teach at a university and needing to get a PhD and wanting to go the education route. So we do something similar. We have a cohort of courses that we put these essentially lecturers through. But what really impressed me was our courses are really sort of pitched at a master's level. So it's an MPhil kind of level, postgraduate level. But we certainly do not get journal papers out of our assignments, and I was intrigued by that because we found that the whole of the first year, it takes the whole of the first year for students for PhD scholars to get to the place where they feel comfortable enough to start using the tools, to start sort of formulating their problem, understanding what qualitative, in our case, mostly qualitative research is like. And it's just very impressive to me to think you get a 7,000 word essay that after, one set of revisions is of publishable standard. And I'm intrigued by that and would love to hear from the students just, was that a big, did you get your assignments published? What was that experience like?
Yeah, who wants to come in on that one? Ronnie?
I think being, an early-ish cohort, I think there was a bit less emphasis on that. I think the staff team became wise to this increasingly. But I did have an early publication, and I wouldn't have thought of it. And Paul Trowler said to me, yep, I reckon this is something that you could publish in X or Y journal. Just tweak this, tweak that, and you've got a publishable piece of work here. So I think the staff encouraging you that it doesn't matter if you know what Goffmanian eclecticism means, and I still don't know what it means, that you can still publish because you are the expert in your field with the help of the research that you've been doing. You've got something to say.
Yeah, Catherine, you said you'd published from the course, but in part one. So
yeah,
during the course.
I think part of that, as I recall, when we were formulating our assignment topic, you know, we had the broad brief, but then you had to sort of decide how you would tackle it. And I think through discussion with one of the tutors, it was a sense of, well, what kind of, think of it as a journal article, what kind of journal would you be trying, what kind of community would you be trying to engage in a professional dialogue discourse with? So I had a sort of journal in mind, and I think that really helped, you know, thinking what issues, you know, what contribution to knowledge would I aspire to make? And I think that focused my mind quite usefully. And so I got 2 journal articles out of the first half of the course, which served as, one was my sort of my literature review, which I had to sort of update and refresh for the final thesis. And one was actually in a bit more of a side area that I didn't use in phase 2, but it did have, and the feedback obviously from the reviewers hones the writing all the more.
Well, that's the plan. Catherine, your book chapter that you mentioned, that's from your doctorate.
Yeah, so that was further down the line, really, that I've published that. But yeah, I mean, I found, and there's some articles that are sort of pending from the earlier parts that I've been working on. I think the course is really an accelerator, is what I'd say to Renee. It just, the way it's designed, it gives you confidence, but it is that learning with the peer group that helps you very quickly. And also there are very high expectations. I remember someone sharing with us that an external examiner of the course had said that she was really surprised at how the standard of the output, and it is very, very quick that people get up to that academic level. And I think part of it is because you are, you know, you're pulling apart other academic articles, you're really getting rehearsed in how to do that, not just zoning in on your longer term thesis. And I think that way it's broken down into modules is why it's accelerated your ability to write to that standard so quickly.
Okay, we're running short of time, but Simon, brief summary in response to that question?
It's, the beauty of the program is writing is embedded right into it all the way through. And in writing, in getting stuff down on paper, you've got to do a lot of work to get there. So you can think ideas at speed of light or whatever, but writing it down, you've got to slow down and think about how every sentence, every paragraph does some work for you and getting as much over in a concise position as possible. And not everything you're writing is going to be a publishable article. There's lots of smaller bits of writing that are going on at the same time, honing other bits and pieces of skills as you go through. In terms of taking them to publication, there's something publishable with them, but they're not oven ready. There's still work to be done. And a lot of that comes from the feedback from the person who's doing the marker and any other reviewer that might look at it. And it's trying to work out the discourse, that conversation you are going to be involved in. Now, I got quite a few publications before I came to doing the PhD already through some of the collaborations I've been involved in historically. And the other thing you've got to get used to in terms of doing publication, I think, is failing and being rejected and just kind of thinking of why they're rejecting you. Why didn't it fit in with this journal? Should I have a conversation with the editor before you're kind of thinking of putting it into the journal? And thinking it's appropriateness for the audience you're trying to address. That's the thing, the beauty of what the PhD is doing to you all the time. And I'm still working at, you know, I'm doing this book chapter for Brett, same as Catherine is. And again, Brett's come back and gone, yeah, there's 3 great articles in here, but we only won 1 thank you, Simon. And it's that focus and gaining that focus. I think that it drives into you in some ways, but it doesn't mean you're perfect at it once you come out. It's like your driving test, isn't it? You know the basics, but you've still got a lot of work to hone it down.
Yeah, well, it's one of those arts you never master, isn't it? Also, just very briefly before we finish, so comment from Lauren, who's just finishing, and she was in Catherine H. She's in Catherine H's cohort, but she said that she's still receiving support from people who finished, who are in her cohort. and she's just finishing off. So to our guests, thanks for coming. To our roundtable people, thanks so much for contributing. It's really sort of enlightening and heartwarming to hear how DPER has been really helpful for you. So Ronnie, Catherine H, Catherine OC, and Simon, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Lovely to speak with you all.
Yeah.
Bye.